Sairam, dear viewers, we're having a slight technical difficulty. We will be on air very shortly. Jai Sairam. Om Shri Sairam, and once again, welcome to Friday Night Inspirations, bringing together great minds and great music all under one roof. We have a very special program in store for tonight, a special panel discussion that we like to call Dharmic Discussions. But before we get underway, let us begin with the song that relates to today's topic. This song, for your information, is a Sikh bhajan or a shabad. It's a Sikh devotional song in the language of Gurbani, describing that we surrender ourselves to God, who is our Guru and best friend. Jai Sai Ram. उतर गयो मेरो मन का संसार जब ते दर्शन पाया ठाकुर तुम शरणाई आया ठाकुर तुम शरणाई आया उतर गयो मेरो मन का संसार उतर गयो मेरो मन का संसार जब ते दर्शन पाया ठाकुर तुम शरणाई आया ठाकुर तुम शरणाई आया। मेरी बिरथा जानी उन बोलत मेरी बिरथा जानी उन बोलत मेरी बिरथा जानी अपना नाम जपाया अपना नाम जपाया ठाकुर तुम समाये 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 दुख नाते सुख सहज समाये अनद अनद गुण गाया अनद अनद गुण आया अनद 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 गुण आया ठाकुर तुम शरणाई आया। बाह पकड़ कर लीनो अपने बाह पकड़ कर लीनो अपने ग्रंथ कूपते माया ग्रंथ कूपते माया ठाकुर तुम शरणाई आया ठाकुर ओ ठाकुर तुम शरणाई आया। कहो नानक गुरु बंधन काटे गुरु बंधन काटे बंधन काटे बंधन काटे बंधन काटे बंधन काटे कहो नानक गुरु बंधन काटे बिछरत आन मिलाया बिछरत आन बिछरत आन बिछरत आन बिछरत आन बिछरत आन मिलाया ठाकुर 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 तुम शरणाई आया ठाकुर तुम शरणाई आया। ठाकुर तुम शरणाई आया ठाकुर तुम शरणाई आया साई साई तुम शरणाई आया बाबा तुम शरणाई बाबा 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 तुम शरणाई आया बाबा तुम शरणाई आया बाबा तुम शरणाई आया बाबा तुम शरणाई आया। Sairam, with that, let us move on. Let us move on to our next segment of tonight's program, and that is Dharmic Discussions. This is going to be a fun-filled, laid-back panel discussion about just any random spiritual topic that comes to mind. Now connecting live with my counterpart, Brother Siddharth Sai Shivakumar, who is in Cleveland. Siddharth, you are live on the airways.
Sairam, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Wonderful. Well, it's a great honor to be here on the broadcast today. It's been quite a while since our last Friday Night Inspirations, or FriNI as we lovingly call it. And it's wonderful to be back on the air with you, Rushi, and with all of your listeners worldwide.
Awesome. So, Siddharth, tell us what's in store for today's discussion.
Well, before we get into talking about the topics, I would like to alert everybody of a very interesting and celebratory thing today, and that is that today's broadcast is the 1.5-year anniversary of our very first Friday Night Inspirations, which occurred last year on February 1st. So that's a wonderful milestone for all of us. So congratulations, Rushi. This is a great day to be having this program right now.
Of course, congratulations to you too, and congratulations to all our viewers and listeners as well who have been with us for the last 1.5 years and even longer. We've been broadcasting on this YouTube channel for almost 2 years, and that'll be coming up on August 29th, the 2nd year anniversary, and we'll be, of course, having a special celebration for that as well.
Absolutely. So it's wonderful to be here today, as I've said before, and can't wait to get started talking. For anyone who's tuning in for the first time today, who hasn't heard of Dharmic Discussions before, Dharmic Discussions is just a little heart-to-heart talk that we have, Rushi and I, about several different topics, and we hope that you enjoy listening and draw something from it. So today we have a few different topics in store that we've planned. The first is detachment, so both emotional and material detachment, and what that means for us in our day-to-day lives. The second is patience. So, the age-old duo, Shraddha or Sabri, faith and patience.
Yes, we've had a couple of discussions about Shraddha and Saburi. One, we actually had it in a Dharmic discussion, and going back to February 22nd of 2013, Shankar Iyer uncle of Fairfax, Virginia, also spoke on the same topic when he spoke on Friday Night Inspirations back then.
Right. So that's if you haven't seen that program, please, to all the listeners who are listening in, please go back and take a look at that. We'll link it in the description below this video. So patience is our next topic, and then after that, what goes along with patience? Well, self-control, obviously. So we'll be talking a little bit about self-control and discipline and routine and those kinds of things. And then we'll talk about a favorite, which is doership or surrender. And what does that mean, to someone like us, informally? Just what does doership mean? And then we'll close up our discussion, and we'll have some melodious and beautiful bhajans. So we're looking forward to that.
Of course. So why not we get underway?
Absolutely. So first topic today is actually a pretty popular one. I know that we've talked about it a little bit before, but maybe we'll talk about it in a different capacity today. So what is detachment? What does that word even mean in the first place?
So detachment, according to Webster's dictionary, detachment is... Let's see. Detachment in psychology refers to the inability to connect or mental assertiveness. That is emotional detachment, according to Webster's.
Right. And you can look up several different synonyms for that word: neutrality, impartiality. So I think for us, it's useful to kind of come up with a definition for ourselves of what detachment is. We hear so many different gurus and spiritual leaders talk about the importance of detachment and what it means to be attached and detached. I think to some extent it's important to have our own sort of understanding of what that is, our own connotations, our own definitions. So, to me, detachment is a feeling of a feeling of non-causality with anything that happens around us in terms of how it affects our well-being and how it affects our spiritual progress. So I'll give you an example. Emotional detachment is pretty obvious. There's a pretty obvious example, which is your parents. You feel like a really strong emotional detachment to your parents from the day you're born. There's a psychological term for children who experience attachment and experience fear and sadness when their parents leave, young children, and that's called separation anxiety. And as a child, it's pretty hard to be detached. If you tell a 3-year-old, be detached from your parents, I mean, if they leave you for 10 minutes, don't start crying. A 3-year-old's not really going to understand that, and as they shouldn't, because at that age, that's the innocence, and that's because they are, in many ways, more spiritually advanced than we are as we lose our innocence as we get older. But detachment from your parents is emotional detachment from your parents. It shouldn't be misconstrued, but it's a really interesting example of how emotional detachment plays in our everyday lives.
Of course, that's a very good point that you bring up about our parents and being emotionally attached to them. Swami says that Swami, always loves playing with words, and he says parents actually means pay rent. So not that we can never fulfill the obligation that we have incurred to our parents, but at least we can give them the respect and honor that they deserve for raising us, and instilling in us all these good qualities and raising us to be the individuals that we become.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of specifically about parents, and I know we've talked about this before, but the concept of pay rent is not just material. It's of course, our parents they dedicate a lot of their material wealth and their whatever they own to us. But it's not just about paying that back. It's about paying back all of the time, the effort, the love, and the opportunities that they give us. Because parents are, yes, it may be their duty to support the child, to be there for the child, but it's not. But it is not an easy one, for sure. And it's not, in many cases, there are parents who seem to neglect that duty. So it is really important to cherish the parents that you have, and to really love them and treat them, as God, as Swami says, Matru Devo Bhava, Pitru Devo Bhava. It's really important to cherish them and to treat them with the utmost of respect, but more importantly, to give back to them in at least a fraction of what they have given to us.
Of course. Giving back to parents is a very good point, and we almost feel that sometimes you may feel that it's a parent's duty to take care of the child, like you said, but it is out of that love that Swami has given us these parents. In Catholic school, I learned that God, one of the parables that they teach us taught us in Catholic school, where I attended until 4th grade, was that because God couldn't be with every child, He expanded Himself into the form of our parents, and that is what our parents are to us. And speaking of parenthood and motherhood especially, recently Radio Sai released a video of Swami giving a discourse shortly after Sai Gita's passing, or Samadhi as we would call it. And in the video, we're seeing Swami is, for half an hour, he's mentioning the different qualities of this arbitrary elephant, of how much he loves this elephant, how much devotion the elephant has. And then finally, after half an hour of just describing this elephant, he finally reveals that he's actually talking about Sai Gita. And when he says that, Swami breaks down into tears, and that is something that is such an emotional sight that even I had broken down when watching that video. So Swami is showing there that there is a fine line between detachment and vatsalyam, which is the love of the mother, and that is exactly what Swami said once he recollected himself from weeping. He said that this is not any sort of attachment or bodily attachment that I had with Sai Gita. It is the vatsalyam, or the motherly love, that is causing this suffering and angst, but in reality is not so.
And motherly love, or vatsalyam, as you say, uh, I feel is the strongest of all of the kinds of love that I've ever experienced. It's unconditional, it's selfless, it's ever flowing, and it's never malicious. There's not an ounce of insincerity in it. It's one of the most beautiful things you can ever experience. Uh, and I kind of want to narrate a really quick story.
Go ahead.
That's parallel to the Sai Gita story. So I have a dog, as you know. I have a dog named Bhairav. Interesting story behind his name, but that's for a different time. And we got him a couple of years ago, and he is the most beautiful, energetic bundle of joy that you'll ever meet. He's a black lab and hound mix. He's very athletic, and so before I continue gushing about him, let me get to the story. He I mean, when I left for college, my parents were worried that I would miss them and that I would miss my sister, and I would miss home and I would miss fresh food and all of those things. But what I was most worried about was that I would miss him. So, and the reason for that is that he is, in many ways, my Sai Gita. He's unconditionally loving. He may not always be very energetic and ready to sit by your side because he's tired, but he's always ready to see you, whether you leave the house for 10 seconds, 10 minutes, or 10 days. Um, Whenever you get back, he's excited to see you and so happy to shower you in all of the love that he has to give you. Um, and that love, because it's so unconditional. See, mother's love is definitely unconditional, but there are some sort of, you kind of create these kind of treaties with your parents. You say that, okay, we have certain deals and certain kind of agreements in this house. But with the dog, there's no agreements. The dog, even when you house train the dog, when you housebreak the dog, it's not an agreement. The dog genuinely makes it a part of their sadhana, part of their life. And so, with Bhairav, my dog, when I left home and I came to college, I was distraught for a long time because I felt like he was not there in my life anymore, and I had no one to shower me with unconditional love anymore. And I think in many ways that is a sort of, I mean, and I'm not close to becoming a parent or close to becoming or definitely not going to become a mother, but that's very close to the sort of relationship that I think a mother and a child have. It was a stark reminder to me that that is the sort of love that we should try and inculcate with every person. And we can learn a lot from dogs. You mentioned Shankaraya, uncle, a while back. Shankaraya as well has a dog, and that's the one thing he stresses all the time is that dogs and animals of many kinds are the most unconditional creatures on the planet. They have no monkey mind to steer them left or right. They're always there for you, and they're always by your side. They're very loyal. And in many ways, though he's a dog, and though he may not be the smartest of all the creatures that I've met in my life, he certainly is the most loving, and he's a role model in that fashion, in that way.
So, Sid, let me make a clarification here. Many times we've heard Swami tell us in discourses that we shouldn't develop animal qualities. We've heard him say this phrase so many times, don't have animal qualities. But from what I interpret from that is that the quality itself is being referred to by Swami as the animal quality. But animals have their own dharma, just as we have our own dharma. So I think that when Swami says that, don't develop animal qualities, he's not trying to say that, animal qualities are bad. He's just telling us to focus on the human qualities.
Right. We've heard time and time again that humans are the most advanced creatures on the planet, and it's pretty apparent. But in many ways, that advancement comes at a cost, and that cost is multifold. It's that we have a mind that has a will of its own, and we're easily deterred from the path of the heart. We we get angry. We have many different negative qualities, ego and greed and anger and all of those things. So, so in many ways there are, but there are also some wonderful qualities about humans. And in our daily life, we interact 99.9% with humans and not with animals. except for maybe the fly that's buzzing around in your room or the dog that you see walking down in the street. We interact with humans most of the time. So it is an important distinction, and good thing you brought that up. That's a good point.
Of course. So, speaking of detachment, you have to wait so long to see Bhairav. Um, someone like me who goes to school approximately 100 miles away from home, I can come home upon will. Just today I decided to come home, so I came home and we're having this broadcast right now. But you are, I don't know, about 300 to 400 miles away from home.
Right. Yeah. It is quite far. So I do have to have a bit of patience in order to wait until the next break or, the next cheapest flight for me to take a trip back home and visit family and visit Bhairav.
And I feel like, I'm being very selfish, even hearing that. Today I was on, today I was on the bus coming from Philadelphia to Newark and then catching on a metro train from Newark to Jersey City. And as the bus was entering the bus terminal at Newark, it took the bus 25 minutes just to traverse one city block because this one cop car was randomly standing in the middle of the road, having no business there whatsoever. And inside you just feel like so much frustration and so much, almost kind of an anger that, oh my God, I can literally walk out of the bus right now, get on the metro and come home. But sometimes we just need to have that patience. So what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, that's a really good example of how our mind can get the better of us. I remember, I'll narrate a really similar story, and in fact, you were there with me. This was last year, at around this time of the year, a little bit earlier. We were taking our trip to India in order to record our album Shwas. Little plug there. So we were flying through, I remember your parents had booked the tickets. We were flying out of Newark and through Brussels and Belgium, and then off to Delhi and then to Chennai. So I'm not a big fan of flights. I can tolerate them, but they're not my favorite method of travel. Let's just put it that way. So
I love flights.
We just gone through the first flight, and we were waiting in Brussels, and waiting. The flight's going to leave in a couple of hours, and we were sitting at the gate, just walking around, just.
And remember those the walking escalators?
Yeah, the moving sidewalks, right? The people movers. We were just walking. We'd been sitting for a while, so we were walking back and forth. And we see that the flight is getting delayed, maybe half an hour to an hour. Not a big deal. We'll just wait. It's probably just a small issue with the plane not arriving on time. So we wait. We see the plane is actually docked there at the jet bridge, and so we said, okay, maybe the crew's not there. We'll just wait for it. Another hour passes, and then they delayed another hour, and then another one, and then another one, and soon it's being delayed 3 or 4 hours ahead, and at this point, I was getting a little bit frustrated for two reasons. Number one, because we have a connecting flight. If we were flying directly from Brussels all the way to a final destination, that's not an issue. But we have a connecting flight off to somewhere else from Delhi. And then, and so I was getting kind of worried about that. And number two, flying is not my strong suit, and I was just getting stressed about it. And it was a lack of patience. Finally, we find out that because of a major technical issue with the plane, because there was a fuel leak, in the plane, the fuselage, they have to delay the plane. They have to delay the flight by an entire 24 hours before we can even think about boarding any sort of aircraft to leave Brussels. So now here we are. We're just starting our beautiful trip off to India to go to visit Parthi and to visit my grandparents and to record this album. And we're stuck in the middle of a country I've never been in before, where the only saving grace I have is that I have an American passport, so I can enter the country legally, and and I'm a young person with just my friend and no other people around me to help me out, no phone or anything like that. But the thing that really struck me was that I was not very patient in that moment. I was freaking out because I thought about all the time that we would have lost if we could have gained back if we had caught the flight earlier, and how long we'd have to wait in Delhi for a connecting flight. It was lack of patience. And it's very similar to your story, although it's a much more blown up story than your experience today. It's a very similar sort of feeling, and I'm sure everybody's felt that in the morning when they're driving to work or taking public transportation and they get held up somewhere. Patience is a very important virtue, but for some reason it's so difficult to keep in the back of our minds and to implement in our everyday lives. Why do you think that is?
Well, patience is something, we always hear patience is key, But bringing this back to Shankar Iyer's talk and what we talked about before about Shraddha and Saburi, which is Shirdi Sai Baba's common axiom, how to overcome this, impatience that we have. One way that I tend to use is, if let's say my bus is getting delayed, then I just feel that, maybe I'm just not meant to be there at this time. Or even with the airplane, I really don't want to bring up this example, but, if they rush airplane takeoffs, if you can have tragedies such as MH370, or, going back to the Challenger space shuttle loss that happened in 1970s, what happened was that, they were just very impatient to get the shuttle off the ground. And in that, they disregarded a small crack in one of the solid rocket boosters, and 52 seconds into the flight, the entire shuttle burst. So sometimes, when things are getting delayed, be it under control or not under our control, often, if you have that mindset that, this is Swami's wish, this is God's wish that this is happening, it can save us from a lot of stress and a lot of tension.
Right, and it's interesting that you bring up the concept of stress, because stress can be mitigated by essentially what we were talking about earlier, which is detachment. If you're detached from the circumstances, from the environment, and I don't mean detached as in unaware, I mean detached as in not bothered by the circumstances that you're in a particular moment, especially when they're not to your standards. Swami says that you don't know what you want. So we think that we know what it is we're supposed to be doing, or what it is that is supposed to be happening to us at any given point in time. In reality, I feel like if we're detached from that sort of expectation, we'll never be stressed, especially in a situation where it's a time-sensitive issue, you have to catch a flight, you have to submit a report, or you're waiting on something very important, and you got to get something done quickly. Instant gratification is an expectation, and often it's an unrealistic one. So that's stress is derived from attachment to the environment and to the circumstances, which sometimes we have no control over.
Very true. So having this faith in God can also help us with self-control. Speaking of self-control, one of the things that a lot of gurus, a lot of spiritual masters suggest is that we do meditation, daily meditation on a certain regimen. And until for the last couple of months, actually, I was just kind of in this mindset that meditation is not my thing.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that I'm singing bhajans, I'm doing music, that itself is my meditation. But in the last couple of months in school, I've realized that sometimes you just have to set that time back from the whole world. It's pretty cliche that meditation takes us away from the world, takes us away from all our worries. But as much as that's a cliche, it's very necessary that we do that on a regular basis, be it for a minute or Shrikant Sola. He's the head of cardiology at the Sri Satya Sai Institute of Higher Medical Sciences at Bangalore. He always in his talk shares about this 12-second thumb meditation, that for 12 seconds, look at your thumb and focus on it just for 12 seconds. And if you do that with the right intent and the right strength, that can actually lead to spiritual realization. So, if something can happen in 12 seconds, of course, we're nowhere close to being capable to do something like that. But if we do it regularly, at least we can take that first step.
Absolutely. I was just about to bring up the thumb meditation point. I try thumb meditation, pretty often. It's quite difficult. Often I feel like I can get 2 or 3 seconds in where I'm completely focused on the thumb. But after a certain point, my mind wanders. Even if it wanders a slight bit, even if I think about the fact that I'm meditating, that leads my mind to wander. The monkey mind is really a very tricky thing to have control over. It's interesting that we bring up meditation, because they say that in a lot of different scriptures and teachings, they say that breath control is one of the greatest ways to have, really, really good self-control and really good discipline. It's interesting because the research that I'm doing research right now at Case Western here in Cleveland, and the research that I'm doing seems to indicate that I'm doing cardiovascular and respiratory research. The research that I'm doing seems to indicate that the breaths that you take, they inform the parasympathetic response in your body, which then, in essence, controls your heart and a lot of other, organ functions, specifically your heart. That the breath and the heart are coupled, and mostly they're coupled in the direction of the respiration controlling the heartbeat. So just by breathing slowly, there are a variety of responses in your body that can cause your heart rate to go down. So I've taken it upon myself that whenever I feel myself getting stressed or anything like that, I just close my eyes, take 1 or 2 really deep breaths, and it slows my heart rate down. And actually, this is a really well-documented medical phenomenon. It's called respiratory sinus arrhythmia. It's really, really common, and it validates a lot of the teachings, a lot of things that we have heard in SSC, in various different teachings and disciplines, where they say that simple breath control can lead to wonderful results in terms of keeping your self-control and keeping your cool and not being too stressed. Why do we need to be stressed all the time in the day? Let's just sit down, drink a glass of water, take a couple of breaths, look at your thumb, meditate for a few seconds, and that's it. You're back in shape and ready to go.
Of course, every so often we just need to take that step back. What I usually do is if I'm, while I'm I also work in the lab right now, and a lot of times you just have a downtime between a couple experiments or waiting for some cells to transfect. And in the downtime, I'm usually instructed to read a couple papers to help me write, my any upcoming publications that I may have. So, while I'm reading these like very complex, long papers and like all these PhD thesis papers and everything, it can be mentally very strenuous. And if I ever get to a point where I lose focus, I just take a step back, take a deep breath, maybe chant a Gayatri mantra, do that thumb meditation, and I'm back on track.
Yeah, the Gayatri mantra is really powerful as well. Whenever I have a little bit of downtime, my mom drilled this into me. Whenever I have a little bit of downtime, I always try and chant a Gayatri mantra because it's extremely powerful. And especially if you have the faith in it, that's what gives its power. So meditation, just to sum up, meditation and having really good self-control leads to a lot of leads to living a more peaceful life, especially day to day. They say if you want to live a peaceful life, you should have peace of mind, so meditation, I think, is a way to go in that respect.
Of course, peace is very important for living, and it's one of the 5 human values: truth, right, peace, love, and nonviolence, and right conduct. And speaking of peace, Swami has given us 3 P's. Actually, peace is not one of them, but they're patience, purity, and perseverance. And we need the patience and perseverance to have self-control and to develop such routines that we're always on track. And we need to always be in that mind state.
Yeah, patience, specifically patience, I think is a really important part of those 3 in order to lead to the sort of peace that we're talking about. Perseverance is an interesting one as well, because that leads to, perseverance ties in with routine and discipline and sadhana, as we've been talking before. I'm not sure if you remember, I'm sure you remember, but I'm not sure if you've thought about it recently, but when the Mid-Atlantic region was planning to go to Patti back in 2006 and 2007, and we were taking a skit, a drama with us, where all the SSC children, the Baltikas children, would put on a skit. Unfortunately, we didn't get to put it on in Patti, but the region got an opportunity to perform later in 2010. During the process of preparing for that, the regional devotional coordinator at the time, Kathy Aarti, used to make all the children fill out these sadhana sheets or discipline sheets, which contained 10 to 12 different items that we had to do every day. Some of those involved meditation, as we talked about, Gayatri, which we've talked about, saying prayers in the morning, evening, and night, or morning, afternoon, and night. And some other things to avoid, like avoiding junk food, avoiding non-vegetarian food, avoiding excessive TV or video games or things like that. And even from a young age, I see that having discipline and having self-control and persevering through the process of filling that sheet out and keeping track of your duties every day and being honest about it, has taught me a lot. Even though at the time it was quite annoying every day to have to do that, I really see the merit in that activity now thinking back about it. And that's the perseverance that I think is necessary in order to have the peace of mind that we're discussing.
Right. And, now that we're college students and we have, we're spending less time in class and we have so much free time on our hands, and a lot of times we don't know what to do with that free time. But, this whole thing of sadhana sheets, sadhana charts has been ingrained in us. And I'm not saying that we're some special kids, that we had this awesome opportunity. But it just goes to show that, when discipline is enforced from a young age, and we have these sadhana sheets that we're filling out of, some of these tasks were really mundane, like not watching too much TV, eating healthy food, going to sleep at a reasonable time.
Right. I think one of them was hygiene, which I hope that children are doing that without having to fill it out on a sheet. But go on. You were saying.
Right. Of course, and all these mundane tasks. And today, we're here. We're working in labs. We have very high-level positions. We have so much work on our hands, and it may seem that where is the connection between the sadhana sheets and whatever we're doing today, but it's very important. And it's a very strong connection, actually, and we may not realize it, but these ideals that have been instilled in us are reflecting today.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that. I think that a lot of the values that I've learned as a child, I don't even realize how they play into my day-to-day life. And for sure, without a doubt, all the lessons that I'm learning today will rear their sort of their grace and their effects on my behavior and what happens to me later on in life. There are lots of lessons that I learn right now doing research and living alone at college. There are lots of things to learn, and I'm sure that they'll play a role later on in life. And so we need to persevere through learning those lessons and take to heart whatever it is that we do learn. For example, I'll give you a quick example, a little story. So I went on a cruise, on a vacation cruise, and before I left on the cruise, which left from New York, I had a lot of items that I had to keep from home, that I had to pack at home in order to bring to college. So I thought that after I got back from the cruise, I'd have a couple of days. I would be able to put all the things, together, and then my dad would drive me up to Cleveland and deliver all the items. Well, unfortunately, my dad has a traveling job, and he was scheduled, and we didn't know this until we started taking the cruise. He was scheduled to leave for Australia immediately after we went on immediately after we got back from the cruise. And my mom can't leave my sister alone, and she's got a job. So in the end, we decided that the only possible way that I would be able to get to Cleveland in time to start my job was to bring minimal stuff with me, just one suitcase full of some food and some clothes, and fly up here immediately after getting back from the cruise, which meant two things. Number one, I couldn't bring all of the items that I wanted to, which was my fault for not planning and not leaving them in Cleveland so that we didn't have to bring them back up. And number two, it meant that I wouldn't be able to organize all the items at home, and I wouldn't have time to come back and organize them. So right now, my parents just this past weekend drove all the way up here to deliver all the items. They're all in big boxes that haven't been organized, and I have to spend the time now organizing them. So what I can say is that lesson of planning and organization, I've learned that I've had the lesson in my life many times before, but for some reason I neglected to heed that lesson in this case, and so it spiraled out of control and became a much larger problem. So in the vein, so what's the moral of the story? In the vein of this experience, there are so many other types of lessons that we learn in our lives, especially as children. And when we learn them as children, they're innocent little small mistakes. They're not even mistakes, they're just flukes. And you learn from them and then you grow from them. But if you don't learn from those mistakes, and if you continue to make those mistakes, they get more and more severe and more dire as you get older. And so, for example, the sadhana sheets were something that were kind of drilled into us, and I'm very glad for that, because if it were not for that, I may not have the sort of sadhana that I have today, which still I feel can be improved. But the point of this is that if you learn the lesson when you're younger and it's ingrained in you, then it won't rear its ugly head later. And so in the end, you won't have to deal with a much worse problem when you get, later on in life.
Right. And, my mom is an SSC teacher, and she's been also enforcing this sadhana chart thing with her students in her class. So I just wanted to take a minute out of our discussion to let my mom talk about, the deeper significance of these sadhana sheets.
Sure. Sairam Auntie, please tell us what you think about this.
Yes, we call a good habit chart or a sadhana chart. And I think I began that a long time back, even though I was not a teacher, with my children, means Rushi, Prachi and Shivani, who is right now Prachi Shivani. Prachi is 29-year-old, and I began the sadhana chart at that age. Even I was not introduced that sadhana chart in SSC, but Rushi was going for surgery, and then I have to make sure that my kids are doing the things the way I wanted. So what I did, I started to make their life full of discipline, and without wasting time, I made them that you have to bow down, and then whatever in what I wanted to do them. So like a mother, I was not physically present, but the sadhana chart was there to tell them what is to be done, when it is to be done, and that really raised my children with full of values and without wasting any times, and they were able to, at the end of the day, I was able to see that even though I was not at home after coming, they were able to reach their goal. So my only advice that all children should be, as they have to follow I know you don't have much time, but the good habit chart, which creates good habits and which will automatically will give you the things, detachment and whatever you are taught, because you will not waste your time in unnecessarily things. So
Right. Thanks, Mom, for that wonderful exposition.
That's a great explanation of what it is. It's in many ways it's a good habits chart. I think if we can get a copy of that, we might put it up in the description below this video. If any of the listeners want to take a look after this video is published, maybe they can take a look at that.
Sure. So speaking of good habits and developing good habits, one of a very renowned spiritual guru once said, to develop a habit or quit a habit is you can do it in 21 days. This is an arbitrary number, but he said that with the grace of God, to kick a bad habit or to develop a good habit, you can do it in a fraction of a second. And so when we think that we're going through so much spiritual development, is it really us or is it somebody else?
Well, that's a very good question. I think the answer to that question lies in your mentality. It lies in the way that you approach thinking about developing habits and duties and things like that, and responsibilities. So this goes into the idea of doership, and who is the doer? Are you the doer, or is someone else a doer? So Swami has repeatedly said, and so have many other gurus, that we are merely instruments of his divine will. Just as someone who's very talented may pick up a flute and start playing, Uh, the flute is a beautiful instrument and it produces a wonderful sound, but the flute itself does not have the means to produce the music. It's the musician who plays the flute who generates this melodious tune.
Yes, very true, Sid. So, um, so we have this story. Speaking of doership, we have this story of this man was driving a bullock cart, and the bullock cart got stuck in mud, and then he's a very devoted man, and he simply starts praying to God. God, come, help, save me, and take this cart out of the mud. But Siddharth, why don't you continue with what God's response was to that?
Right. So I believe the story goes that the man was just praying that God, please help me take this cart out of the mud, and I have to get this home, and I won't be able to take this out. And he's just standing there, both his hands kept together, just looking up and praying. Then an old and wise man comes walking down the road and says, "Hey, what are you doing? Why are you just standing there praying?" And he says, "I'm praying for this bullock cart to get out of the mud. I'm praying to God." And this man says, "You're so foolish. Why are you simply standing there praying? Why don't you at least pick up one half of the cart? If God is going to help you take the cart out, do you think he'll be able to pick up the whole cart himself? If you can't take the cart out yourself, then how do you expect God to do it, all by himself? Why don't you pick up one half of the cart and then pray, and then God will help you?" And so the old man walks on his way, and this man who has a cart stuck in the mud takes it to heart. And so with all the faith in the world, he says, "God, please help me." And then he picks up one half of the cart and lifts it up, and lo and behold, the other half gets lifted out of the mud, and then he's off on his merry way. So this ties into the idea that if you take one step towards God, he will take 100 steps toward you. Or more generally put, if you take one step towards a goal, God will take 100 steps. God will carry you another 100 steps towards that goal.
Very true, Siddharth. And speaking of doership, even though the man is lifting the cart, but in reality, isn't it God within him? So even though we think that, even though we may be doing half the work, God is doing half the work. And in that kind of an attitude, we develop this feeling that, God is our friend. Yes, God is all doing. Of course, Swami can just blow a puff of air and that whole cart will fly out of the mud. Why not? But by giving us that kind of responsibility, he is building that kind of relationship with us, a kind of friendship. But at the same time, he is showing that it is only him who is within us, and it is him who is doing the other half of the work.
Right, absolutely. I think that, from our perspective, there's a level of abstraction from faith, and then from doership, and from what we believe is our responsibility and our doing. So, what is our doing, and what is simply just the stars that have aligned to cause something to happen, as they say. Well, I think that if you believe that everything is destiny, and then you're just lazy and you don't accomplish anything because you believe that, oh, okay, this was just meant to happen, that was meant to happen, that's the wrong interpretation, or not, maybe not wrong, but more so that is a detrimental interpretation of what fate and destiny are and what doership really is. Doership, I think, and the concept of Lord is a doer and I'm simply the instrument, is a way to absolve yourself of stress, of karma, of the consequences, of the burden, positive or negative, of the burden of actions. It absolves yourself of blame, of praise, of credit, of concern, or of anything. So it allows you to perform your duties without any worry for how the consequences will turn out. What are the consequences of those actions? Provided that the actions that you take are well-intentioned and well thought out, so that in the end, it's all God's will. For example, if you have a very important report to send out, and you've done everything that you can do, everything that you could possibly do, and you have to get it sent out by 5 p.m. And you've planned for it, and you're ready to send it, but your power cuts out, and there's no way for you to send it, and you're not able to send it until after 5. Well, in that case, there may be reasons why you were not able to send it. But if you've completely surrendered that process and given up the doership and said that, Lord, you're the doer, I'm simply an instrument, and done the best that you can and done your entire duty in order to make sure that can get in on time, but it just doesn't, then in the end, whatever happens is not because of you. Whatever happens is not your doing. It's simply just God's will and God's grace that the consequences turned out the way they did. And that can be generalized to any number of situations in our day-to-day lives.
I love how you brought the entire program today into a full circle. We started with a song that talked about Thakur tum saranai aaya, which in Gurbani, which is a derivative of Punjabi language, means, "Oh Lord, we have come at your doorstep to surrender at your lotus feet and to have your darshan," which is the sight of divinity.
Beautiful. I didn't even know that I brought it full circle, but I guess I did. So in the spirit of that beautiful song, I think maybe it's time to wrap up here and continue on our way with some more melodious bhajans so that we can revel in His glory and in His grace.
Yes, and before we end this Dharmic discussion, I'd like to end with a quote from Swami that beautifully summarizes this relationship of doership and surrender. And the quote goes, "The bird with you, the wings with me, the foot with you, the way with me, the eye with you, the form with me, the thing with you, the dream with me. So we are free, so we are bound, so we begin, and so we end. I in you, and you in me, Baba."
Thank you, Sairam.
Sairam. Please stay tuned for just a few seconds as we transition into bhajan mode. Thank you. Jai Sairam. साई गजानन दीनावना साई गजानन दीनावना सिंदूर वदना श्रित जन पालना सिंदूर वदना श्रित जन पालना साई गजानन दीनावना अंबिका तनया अमराधीश्वरा अंबिका तनया अमराधीश्वर अगणित गुणगण आनन्ददायका पाहि गजानन दीनावना सिन्दूरवदना श्रितजनपालना साई गजानन दीनावना अंबिका तनया अमराधीश्वर अमराधीश्वर अंबिका तनया अमराधीश्वर अगणित गुणगण आनन्ददायक अगणित गुणगण आनन्ददायक पाहि गजानन दीनावना पन्नग शयना कलि अवतारा पन्नग शयना कलि अवतारा नारायण हरि ओम नारायण हरि ओम परम निरंजन नीरजनयना परम निरंजन नीरजनयना साईश्वराय हरि ओम सत्य साईश्वराय हरि ओम बुद्धि प्रदायक पाप विनाशक बुद्धि प्रदायक पाप विनाशक सत्य सनातन तुम हो सत्य सनातन तुम हो दीनानाथ हे प्रभु परमेश्वर दीनानाथ हे प्रभु परमेश्वर करुणा सागर तुम हो करुणा सागर तुम हो पन्नग शयना कलि अवतारा नारायण हरि ओम परम निरंजन नीरज हे प्रभु परमेश्वर, दीनानाथ हे प्रभु परमेश्वर, करुणा सागर तुम हो, करुणा सागर तुम हो। पन्नग शयना कलि अवतारा, वृंदावन में राधे श्याम। वृंदावन में राधे श्याम। अवधपुरी में जय सिया राम। अवधपुरी में जय सिया राम। विंध्य हिमाचल में शिव शंकरा, विंध्य हिमाचल है शिव शंकरा। परतिपुरी में साई राम। परतिपुरी में साई राम। राम कृष्ण शिव गोविंद नर हरि। राम कृष्ण शिव गोविंद नर हरि। नारायणा साई नारायणा। नारायणा साई नारायणा। वृंदावन में राधे श्याम। अवधपुरी में जय सिया राम। विंध्य हिमाचल में शिव शंकरा। परतिपुरी में साई राम। राम कृष्ण शिव गोविंद नर हरि। नारायणा साई नारायणा। 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 साई नारायणा साई नारायणा। वृंदावन में राधे श्याम। अवधपुरी में जय सिया राम।
भोला भंडारी बाबा, शिव 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 साईं बाबा।
भोला Baba, Shiva 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 Sai Baba.
Bhola Bhandari Baba, Shiva 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 Sai Baba.
Bhola Bhandari Baba, Shiva 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 Sai Baba.
अनाथ रक्षक दीन दयाला पतित पावन साई बाबा.
अनाथ रक्षक दीन दयाला पतित पावन साई बाबा.
अनाथ रक्षक दीन दयाला पतित पावन साई बाबा.
रक्षक दीन दयाला पतित पावन साई बाबा.
भोला भंडारी बाबा, शिव 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 साई बाबा.
भोला भंडारी बाबा, शिव 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 साई बाबा.
योगेश्वर साई मुरारी, योगेश्वर हे त्रिपुरारी.
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 नित्यानंदा ब्रह्मानंदा प्रेमानंदा साई बाबा.
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 भोला भंडारी बाबा, शिव 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 साई बाबा.
भोला भंडारी बाबा, शिव 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 साई बाबा.
अनाथ रक्षक दीन दयाला पतित पावन साई बाबा.
अनाथ रक्षक दीन दयाला पतित पावन साई.
भोला भंडारी बाबा, शिव 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 साई बाबा.
भोला भंडारी बाबा, शिव 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 साई.
योगेश्वर साई मुरारी, योगेश्वर हे त्रिपुरारी.
योगेश्वर साई मुरारी, योगेश्वर हे त्रिपुरारी.
नित्यानंदा ब्रह्मानंदा प्रेमानंदा साई बाबा.
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 भोला भंडारी बाबा, शिव 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 साई बाबा.
Ram, you are the guiding light. Ram, your form amazing sight. Ram, you are the guiding light. Ram, your form amazing sight. Ram, you are the might within me. Ram, you are the might within me. Ram, you are the life in all. Ram, Ram, you are the life in all. Protector of right, remover of wrong, Dharma Samrakshaka Sai Rama. Protector of right, remover of wrong, Dharma Samrakshaka Sai Rama. In my heart, as my soul, Atma Rama Sai Rama. In my heart, as my soul, Atma Rama Sai Rama. Ram, you are the guiding light. dynamite within me. Ram, you are the life in all. Protector of right, remover of wrong, Dharma Samrakshak Sai Rama. In my heart as my soul, Atma Rama Sai Rama. In my heart as my soul, Atma Rama Sai Rama. Ram, you are the guiding light. Ram, your form, amazing sight.
Govinda Gopala Prabhu Giridhari, Prabhu Giridhari, Govinda Gopala Prabhu Giridhari,
Govinda Gopala Prabhu Giridhari.
Govinda Gopala Rudaya Vihari,
Govinda Gopala Hridaya Vihari.
Govinda Gopala Rudaya Vihari,
Govinda Gopala Hridaya Vihari.
Govinda Gopala Prabhu Giridhari,
Govinda Gopala Prabhu Giridhari.
Nanda Kumara Navanita Chora,
Nanda Kumara Navanita Chora.
Nanda Kumara Navanita Chora,
Nanda Kumara Navanita Chora.
Parthi Vihara Bada Chit Chora,
Parthi Vihara Bada Chit Chora.
Rudaya Vihara Bada Chit Chora,
Hridaya Vihara
Bada Chita Chora.
Govinda Gopala Prabhu Giridhari,
Govinda Gopala Prabhu Giridhari.
Govinda Gopala Rudaya Vihari,
Govinda Gopala Hridaya Vihari.
Govinda Gopala Prabhu Giridhari,
Govinda Gopala Prabhu Giridhari.
Nanda Kumara Navanita Chora,
Nanda Kumara Navanita Chora.
Parthi Vihara Bada Chit Chora,
Parthi Vihara Bada Chit Chora.
Rudaya Vihara Bada Chit Chora,
Hridaya Vihara.
Bada Chita Chora.
Govinda Gopala Prabhu Giridhari.
तू ही अल्लाह, तू ही मेरा, तू ही जीवन साथी। तू ही अल्लाह, तू ही मेरा, तू ही जीवन साथी हो। घट घट में तेरा श्वास है, घट घट में, घट घट में तेरा श्वास है, सावन में तेरा प्यार, प्यार के हैं हम बंधे, सावन में तेरा प्यार, प्यार के हैं हम बंधे। ओ अल्लाह साईं मेरे ओ मौला, ओ मौला साईं मेरे ओ अल्लाह, ओ अल्लाह मेरा प्यार तू मौला, ओ मौला मेरा प्यार तू बाबा, ओ अल्लाह मेरा प्यार तू बाबा, तू ही अल्लाह तू ही मेरा, तू ही जीवन साथी, घट घट में तेरा श्वास है, सावन में तेरा प्यार, प्यार के हैं हम बंधे, ओ अल्लाह साईं मेरे ओ मौला, ओ मौला साईं मेरे ओ अल्लाह, ओ अल्लाह मेरा प्यार तू मौला, ओ मौला मेरा प्यार तू बाबा, ओ मौला मेरा प्यार तू बाबा, हो मेरा प्यार तू बाबा, हो मेरा प्यार तू बाबा, तू ही अल्लाह तू ही मेरा, तू ही जीवन साथी। मधुवन की मोहन मुरली बजैया, मुरली बजैया, गिरिधारी नंद कुमार कन्हैया, गिरिधारी नंद कुमार कन्हैया, आनंद राम बलराम जी के भैया, हे आनंद राम बलराम जी के भैया, आनंद राम बलराम जी के भैया, हे आनंद राम बलराम जी के भैया, गिरिधारी नंद कुमार कन्हैया, गिरिधारी नंद कुमार कन्हैया, गोपी मनोहर रास रचैया, गोपी मनोहर रास रचैया, गिरिधारी नंद कुमार कन्हैया, गिरिधारी नंदा कुमार कन्हैया, गिरिधारी नंद कुमार कन्हैया, गिरिधारी नंद कुमार कन्हैया। मधुवन के मोहन मुरली बजैया, गिरिधारी नंद कुमार कन्हैया। आनंद राम बलराम जी के भैया, आनंद राम बलराम जी के भैया, गिरिधारी नंद कुमार कन्हैया, गिरिधारी नंद कुमार कन्हैया, गिरिधारी नंद कुमार कन्हैया। साई गिरिधारी नंद कुमार कन्हैया, मेरे गिरिधारी नंद कुमार कन्हैया। मधुवन के मोहन मुरली बजैया, कालातीताय सिद्धिरूपाय योगीश्वराय नमो। कालातीताय सिद्धिरूपाय योगीश्वराय नमो। जगद्विताय विश्वरूपाय, जगद्विताय विश्वरूपाय, साईश्वराय नमो। साईश्वराय नमो। शिवाय नमो। ओम नमः शिवाय 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 शिवाय नमो। कालातीताय सिद्धिरूपाय योगीश्वराय नमो। कालातीताय सिद्धिरूपाय योगीश्वराय नमो। जगद्विताय विश्वरूपाय, जगद्विताय विश्वरूपाय, साईश्वराय नमो। ओम नमः शिवाय शिवाय नमो। ओम नमः शिवाय शिवाय नमो। ओम नमः शिवाय शिवाय नमो। जय जय ओम नमः शिवाय शिवाय नमो। 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 जय जय ओम नमः शिवाय शिवाय नमो। साई ओम नमः शिवाय शिवाय नमो। कालातीताय सिद्धिरूपाय योगीश्वराय नमो।
तैलगिरीश्वर उमा महेश्वर काशी विशेश्वर सदा शिवा। तैलगिरीश्वर उमा महेश्वर काशी विशेश्वर काशी विश्वेश्वर सदा शिवा त्रैलोक्येश्वर उमा महेश्वर काशी विश्वेश्वर सदा शिवा.
Oh, the Lord of the universe is here. Swami Satya Sai is here. Come to save devotees everywhere. Come to bless His children everywhere. Born in Puttapati, the Lord of the universe is here. Calm and tranquil like the moon, shining with divine inner light, filling all with bliss at His side. He is always serving those in need, answering the prayers of devotees, giving grace to you and me. The Lord of the universe is here. Sai, you are Guru, God and Self. Mother, you are everything to us. Father, you are everything to us. You are the divine primal energy. Manifest is all that we ever see. You are the one reality. The Lord of the universe is here. Sai with the sacred form of Om, universal radiance divine. Please accept this offering of mine. The flame of love that burns within my heart, meaning we can never be apart. You and I are ever one. The Lord of the universe is here. Narayana Narayana Om Satya Narayana 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 Om Narayana Narayana Om Satya Narayana Narayana Om Sai Narayana Narayana Om. The Lord of the universe is here. Narayana Narayana Om Satya Narayana 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 Om Satya Narayana Narayana Om Sai Narayana Narayana Om. The Lord of the universe is here. Narayana Narayana Om Satya Narayana 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 Om Narayana Narayana Om Satya Narayana Narayana Om Sai Narayana Narayana Om. The Lord of the universe is here. Om. Peace, peace, peace. Samasta lokaah Sukhino bhavantu. Samasta lokaah Sukhino bhavantu. Samasta lokaah Sukhino bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Jai Bolo Bhagwan Shri Satya Sai Baba Ji ki Jai. Om Shri Sai Ram. We extend our humble gratitude to all who tuned in to this live broadcast and those who will watch the recording thereafter. Have a blissful night. Jai Sai Ram.